Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Since April and May have both gone by, it is time for monthly wrap-ups. So because I totally missed April, I'm going to just be combining them all into one video. I'm gonna be trying to move through this quickly because I have 7 books to talk about. I read 3 in April and 4 in May, and pretty much all of these were in ebook except for one which is in physical copy that was a library book that I've since returned. So there you go. The first book that I read in April was The Storm by Virginia Bergen. This is the sequel to H2O, which I actually do have in physical copy. And I read this book, sometime last year, I think, and I was kind of unsure how I felt about it, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna read the sequel. I decided eventually that I did not like the book enough to read the sequel in like hardcover form, but I did like it enough to buy and read the ebook when it went on sale for like $2, so that's what I did. This completes the series. I still didn't totally dislike this series. Like, there were things about it that I liked. Basically, the premise of this is that there's some kind of asteroid that crashes down onto the Earth or breaks up in the atmosphere or something, and anyway, basically it contaminates the water with this bacterial infection that then starts killing off all of the humans, and it gets into the water, and so rain falls and everyone dies, basically. Hi. So the things that I found kind of frustrating about this book were, first of all, the main character is she's so dumb. She makes like the worst possible decisions in basically every situation, and I was just like, how are you still alive? Like, how have you survived this? I don't, like, everyone else is dead, how have you survived? And it turns out that there's kind of a reason that she's survived, which I won't go into because that's a spoiler. So I would say that it was interesting. The apocalypse part of it was done well. It's a fairly heavy book, particularly the first one, because a lot of people die on screen. And there's also a lot of like animal death and animal abandonment in the first one. There's less of that in the second one, but more of just Ruby's terrible, awful, no good, very bad decisions. Okay. And so overall I would say that it was a sort of middle-of-the-road apocalyptic kind of a novel. I thought that the way that the science was handled was actually fairly interesting, but oh my god, Ruby is kind of infuriating. The next book that I read in April was Vengeance Road by Erin Bowman, and this is a Western, YA, about a girl who goes to track down a group of bandits after they murder her father. I really liked the atmosphere of this novel. I thought that the Wild West feeling of it came through really well. It avoided some of the pitfalls of sort of traditional Westerns where, you know, the main character is female, there are people of color, so it's not just like a totally whitewashed US, and it was also in a very specific time and place, and it was based off of an actual old legend about this like hidden cache of gold in the mountains that supposedly maybe was found or maybe wasn't. It's, you know, it's a legend. And she used that, and I really liked a lot of that stuff. It was also one of those that gets into whether, you know, vengeance is a good idea or not, and it was more complex than I thought it might necessarily be, because a lot of the times in these kinds of stories, especially when it's YA, like the main character kind of has to back down from their vengeance quest because the author doesn't want to put out the idea that vengeance is a good thing. But I thought that it was a little more complex than that, and the main character has a lot of complex feelings about her quest for vengeance, but it also doesn't stop her, and I thought that it was really well done, and I really liked the setting and the atmosphere, and the story was quick and kept me interested through the whole thing. So the final book that I read in April was With Malice by Eileen Cook, and this one is a sort of murder mystery thriller-esque where the main character wakes up in a hospital, and it turns out that she was on a trip in Italy and her best friend got in a car and the car crashed and her best friend is dead, and she doesn't remember this because she's had retrograde amnesia from the head injury that she got in the crash, but basically it turns out that she may have murdered her best friend and she can't remember it, and so there's not a whole lot of evidence. It's mostly circumstantial, but it's basically her trying to piece together the story of did she actually kill her friend or not. And I wanted to like this one. I got kind of bogged down in the middle and it ended up being more predictable than I wanted it to be. I felt like the ending was kind of a cop-out, not that I'm gonna tell you what it is, but I didn't really feel like it resolved in a way that was satisfactory, I guess. It felt kind of cheap. I probably would have given this around like a 2.5 to 3 star mark if we're doing stars. Do I do stars? I've never done stars. I don't know. The whole concept of it, where it's like a murder mystery where the main character is like both the detective and possibly the suspect, is, you know, kind of an interesting twist, and there were some things in it that were good. So this one started out promising, but really by the end I just didn't feel like it was that impressive. So moving on to the books that I read in May, the first of these, oh, am I going to admit that I read this on camera? Yep, okay. So every once in a while I feel the urge to go read a romance novel, and a lot of times I'll read, you know, historical romance like Courtney Milan or something like that. But I picked this one up because it was free off of Amazon. It is Songs You Know by Heart by Eleanor Koss, and this is a gay BDSM romance novel. It was fantastic. It's the first in a series, all following the two main characters, David and Jazz. I might end up reading the rest of these, I'm not sure. It depends on if they go on sale or not, I think, because I don't tend to read romance novels that often. But like I said, this one was really fun. It has some really good dynamics between the two main characters. The main guy, David, is like a wealthy entrepreneur, and Jazz is this young guy that he basically like sort of accidentally picks up in a park. It's short, but I liked all the characters, including the side characters, and it was just a fun time. I don't know what else to say about that. So the next book that I read in May was Every Day by David Levithan. This is about a main character named, I think they go by A, just like the letter A, who basically every day they wake up in the body of someone else, and they are able to access their memories, and so basically they live through the day as this other person, and then they go to bed and at midnight they switch to a new person. A is 17, and so they're always in the body of a 17-year-old, but they can be any race or any gender or anything like that, and so they would probably define themselves as non-binary, although that word is never particularly used. They don't consider themselves a boy or a girl. And the plot begins when A wakes up in the body of this boy who has this girlfriend, and he is not very considerate of her, and it's a fairly toxic relationship. But A ends up taking this girl out on this sort of magical day, and they end up falling in love with her. I'm using they purposefully because of the non-binary thing. And then basically A decides to break their pattern and try to connect with her again, even though they're now, you know, in a different body. This was a really weird book, as you maybe can guess just from the premise. It probably shouldn't have worked. I have read other things by David Levithan, and so I was willing to trust him, but it was a different kind of story than what I've ever read. The concept of a person jumping from body to body didn't seem too strange to me because I've sort of had ideas for stories that weren't totally dissimilar to that, but the way that it all played out I thought was very interesting. So there is a sequel, or more of a companion to Every Day, which is the story told from the perspective of the girl. I will probably read that one day, I think, but I'm not in like a huge hurry to read it, so I liked the book, but I didn't like totally fall in love with it. So I have two more to talk about. The next one is Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albert Holly, and this is about a young high school senior, I think, who is gay and has been keeping up this email correspondence with this other boy who is gay who goes to his school, but they don't know who the other person is. They've been communicating some rather anonymously. A lot of people really, really love this book, and I liked it. The thing is that there were a lot of things in it that rang really, really true to the way that teenagers work, and I thought that the family dynamics between Simon and his family worked really well and felt really real. It was one of those where it was so close that the few things that felt off to me were really jarring because the rest of it worked so well. And so I wanted to really love this book because I know a lot of people really love this book. I didn't quite love it though. However, I did really like it. I thought it was really cute, it's really charming, and it does have a lot of things that ring really true to the like queer experience in high school, particularly when you're not totally sure if and when and how you want to come out. So the final book that I read in May, I did read in physical copy, but I've returned to the library. It was Throne of Fire by Rick Riordan. This is book 2 in the Kane Chronicles. I read Red Pyramid a couple months ago, I think. So these are the books that are centered around Egyptian mythology, following the two siblings, Carter and Sadie, who are brother-sister. And they have like hosted the gods in the first book, and now in the second book they're more like training other magicians in order to stop the rise of this like snake demon whose name I've forgotten. Anyway, so the plot follows a like kind of familiar pattern of there's this great evil that's going to be unleashed and they have to prevent it. I really like Rick Riordan, and I do like the Kane Chronicles. I think that you can tell that this is one of his earlier series. It doesn't quite have the same kind of snap that the later Percy Jackson books do, particularly Heroes of Olympus. I felt felt a little bit bad reading this because I really just kind of kept wanting to be reading more Percy Jackson books, which isn't fair because these books are good on their own and they do have a lot of that Rick Riordan flair that I really like, where it has, you know, lots of really fun characters, it has great diversity, it does really interesting things with mythology, he's clearly done his research. I just really love the Percy Jackson books. So I am still moving forward in the Rick Riordan whole collected works. So next up will be the final book in the Kane Chronicles, and then I think I'm gonna read the Magnus Chase books, and then I'm gonna catch up on Trials of Apollo. So I only have one book left, and I am looking forward to it, and I do want to see how he wraps up this series because there are some cool things that he's doing with it. I just really love Percy Jackson. So those are all the books that I read in both April and May. Let me know what your favorite books were in May that you read down in the comments, and I will see you guys very soon with another video. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye! I have 8 books total to talk about. I read 3 in April, and that's 7. Do your math right.